Now, some people ask me, they say, what is the goal of these pro-Hamas mobs, these guns for hire, these terrorist supporters that we've seen in our streets and in our country over the last 3 years? Is their goal to make people hate Jews? And well, of course, that's part of what they want to do. There's an entirely separate goal that we don't talk about enough. And in fact, if their goal is to hate Jews, they're not, to make people hate Jews rather, they're not being very successful. Last year, the Anti-Defamation League did a survey of dozens of countries in the world, and they found that Canada had the lowest proportion of people holding anti-Semitic views in the Western Hemisphere. Now, if that's the goal then, they have been tremendously unsuccessful. But we know there's a whole separate goal. The goal is not simply to make everybody hate Jews or Israel. The goal is to make Jews afraid and less involved in Jewish life, and the goal is to make Canadians, that is the sane, civilized, mainstream majority Canadians, quiet and silenced. And so what is the response then to this? And that's what's so distressing in the last few days. In particular, when we've seen some commentators and influencers on social media say, oh, anti-Semitism, now is the time to leave. We have to cut and run. We have to basically, run off, and we have to let these guys basically take control. And while I understand the knee-jerk reaction that that's caused by seeing the complete impotence and lack of interest in responding to this by municipal, provincial, federal, police, universities, news media, I understand the frustration, believe me, more than almost anybody else. But the response to this cannot be, you're right, we will run away. You're right, we will be less involved in Jewish life. We will give less to charity. We will go to synagogue less. We will put away our symbols of Jewish identity. And frankly, this isn't just for Jews either. When you see these hate mobs burn the Canadian flag, saying death to Canada, and if you notice, you almost never see Canadian flags there, the message is that that's for you too. This is for the majority of Canadians. They don't want Canada to be a country that stands for anything. They want Canada to be much like the flags of the third world failed states that they so often display. And so what is the response here? Is the response to cut and run? Is the response to say that we're fearful that we're going to run away? No, that is not only unhelpful, it is tremendously unhelpful. The response to this is not to be less vocal, but more so. Because when you allow this tiny group of miscreants, of misfits, of Islamist terrorist supporters to effectively take control, what have we done? We have effectively allowed this tiny group to dictate the policy, not just of our country's government, but of society in general. And so therefore the message and the response, the only response to this, is not to cut and run, not to be fearful, not to run away, not to allow them and give them complete control, but to take it back. And this is what I'm reminded of 19th century philosopher Edmund Burke. He said the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is when good men do nothing. The vast majority of Canadians are good people who do not like seeing hateful, screaming Islamist mobs parading and marauding through the streets, shots fired in the middle of the night, and so on. But the point is that they have to speak out, and the Jewish community has to be more visible and more vocal as well. That is the only response, not only the best response, but the only response when you have hate mobs and hate terrorist supporters who seek to silence them. The goal, in the response rather, is not to be silent and let them do what they want, but to be more vocal and see that what they try to do, they're going to be defeated 100 times over. And it's time for Canadians and Jews to refuse to let their country be taken over.